Welcome to Digital Health Talks, where innovators and changemakers share how they're transforming healthcare through technology. Join Megan Antonelli, who will be shining a light on the good things happening in digital health.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Digital Health Talks. This is Megan Antonelli, CEO of Health Impact Live. And today I am joined by an old, fabulous, wonderful friend and a builder, not an observer. He has done so much in healthcare and in business and has been an ally and advisor to Health Impact for many, many years. In the past, he was Chief Innovation Officer at Cambia Health Solutions. He has launched 6 startups inside a $9.8 billion enterprise. He's advised HHS. He's taught at Kellogg for many, many years, and now is a 3-time published author. And that's what we're here to talk to him about today, is his newest book, Unreachable, and the urgent blueprint it is for staying insight-powered in an AI-obsessed era. Mohan, Nair, thank you for joining us today. Great to see you.
Oh, Megan, it's a wonderful pleasure. I can't wait for this conversation.
You know, we were so thrilled to have you join us at Health Impact in February to talk about the book a little bit pre-published, and now it's been out there already on the bestseller list. But tell us, before we get into the book specifics, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here.
Yeah, you mean how I got to the book story, or
the writing of the book and kind of your healthcare background in particular?
Yeah, well, particularly, relevant background. Healthcare is not really it's not really a field. It's an ecosystem, right? So whatever you bring to it, you can utilize if you have experience beyond it. So I've had, 30 years of experience beyond healthcare. And in the course of that, I've applied most of those learnings. And we can get into it a bit as to where those learnings applied. But fundamentally, I've been running companies. I've been installing companies in larger institutions so that we can create them from the inside out. And that experience really flowered itself with my relationship with Cambia Health Solutions, which is about 11 billion now, but when I was there, it was 9 to 11. And that growth cycle required us to really think about different ways in which we could optimize our margins, be honest, because healthcare insurance margins are very low and sometimes below the number. So it's struggling. And we need to generate $100 million in margins to cover for probably $100 million in loss over the next 10 years when I was there. Well, you can see it all come out now. Truly, all this stuff is going on in healthcare. Cambia is doing great from what I can see, but I left 5 years ago to really pursue what I truly wanted to do after my experiences there in launching 9 companies with a small innovation team. But I also, for the first 7 years, was the chief marketing exec, and I ran the entire front end of all of Regence Blue Cross Blue Shield. And that gave me the experience and the understanding of the flow of money, the impact to community, the necessity to get closer to the consumer, and in some ways, not just completely centered around institutional finance movements between different institutions, hospitals, physicians, and patients. It was getting deeper and deeper as I started to learn more about our obligation to healthcare. And my obligation to healthcare has never left. It is still there because it's a human function. It is one where I am constantly in communication with CEOs at all levels of the healthcare ecosystem. And I'm learning from them what their most recent challenges are and also trying to help that process, apart from being a tech guy, which you
Well, I think it's really important to note. Just going from sort of the chief marketing officer at Cambia to then being in charge of their innovations, team and group, and they were really one of the first healthcare organizations to begin, innovating from within and investing in companies and starting startups. It was really the model that, now we see, many health systems going towards, and then independent venture firms, kind of pulling together health systems from a venture side. But Cambia was really early in that and had great success.
Yeah, we were enjoying that. It required to tax me with a lot of stuff as moving from chief marketing exec. Chief marketing exec was a gift they gave me to learn about the business, and I ran most of the front end of that $11 billion company. So trying to understand how to market, how to sell, how to engage customers, And then all the digital assets were under me too. I think they finally moved me to Chief Innovation Officer because I kept inventing and innovating. They had to create a formalism. I remember my boss telling me, we have this new role for you called Chief Innovation Officer. I'm thinking, oh, is this a side job? Have I finally lost my career? Because we did transform it from Regions to Cambia, and that transformation created 25 different separate businesses under one umbrella. And I didn't really want to continue being the chief marketing exec anyway. So when they offered me this chief innovation role, I grabbed it because it was a chance to work with a small group of team members that I could select. It's like any movie you've ever seen. You build your own team and you select them one at a time. And I did do that. I was roaming around the company, roaming around the marketplace, trying to isolate 10 to 11 people with a limited budget so that we had constraints to kind of build the future. And that's where idea management started to pick up, how to manage ideas. The whole idea of design thinking came into frame. This was 2004, Megan. Think about it. Right?
I know. I mean, I remember you sort of getting that title and it being one of the earlier, if not, perhaps the first chief innovation officer at a healthcare organization. So it's, and having watched that in the last 20 years in terms of how that's evolved, and the impact of the way healthcare is looked at and adopted innovation. And I think it just brings us to a really amazing place right now. And as we look at AI and what that is doing to the innovation cycle within healthcare and also to individuals. So that's what I love about Unreachable. And, sort of the tagline, how not to lose your mind in an AI obsessed era, is it approaches it from an individual perspective as well. So tell us a little bit about that and tell us a little bit about the book. And then we can kind of get into where it really kind of speaks to the healthcare innovation person within.
Yeah, I tell you, it's so gratifying, Megan, that you've noticed, and you did it multiple times, that this book was directed not to the governance of AI at a large scale, although it can be used there, but it is applied mostly to individuals. So instead of working on the boardroom book that every board will buy, I think it's going to be a dining room table book that every board member will buy anyway, because it's going to be both longitudinally affecting the dining table as well as the boardroom table. So my target was really to get deep with what individuals have to go through in understanding the concept, all the way to understanding how they can play their part when the high tidal wave of AI, Gen AI, starts to hit the shores of their mind. What happens, right? How do you know where your island is? How do you know where your job is? How do you know where your family is going to survive through this? Because it comes in ubiquitously. And it reminds me of the Apple Macintosh. If you remember, that was denied by corporate America for many years. They kept saying it's a toy, it's a Pong playing thing, let's not worry about it. And IT organizations banned it from the IT infrastructure. And then it started to seep in because the designers wanted it. And when the designers wanted it and were becoming more creative, all of a sudden doors started to open and now it's everywhere. So the same thing is happening in AI. It starts at the dining table. It was spread at the dining table. So to try and organize it the other way around in a top-down way is, I think, naive. And I think that what we have to understand is individual restraint and governance will manage corporate governance and restraint. If we don't make those two meet, we fall apart. So my book, Unreachable, was to kind of tempt individuals at all levels in the institution to really take hold of their agency in terms of what they can bring to the AI world. And I noticed that there were tendencies in that world to bifurcate. One set of people tend to just be AI afraid, and another set tend to be AI obsessed. Neither are good, but they both seem to be the ones that are suddenly in the battlefield of AI. So we can get into what those definitions are, but I found that you can feel it. I don't need to define it. You can feel it around you. People are either into it or they're either Skynet or they're Battlestar Galactica or they're Star Trek, right? It's one of those two movies that you could watch. You could figure out which line they are following in terms of thinking. That's reinforcing the way our culture is forming into a bifurcated society. And we can't let that happen. We need to bring it into something a little bit more empowering and driven with agency to individuals. And hence, that's why I wrote the book Unreachable.
Yeah. No, and I think that sort of the fast adopter that, we all want to identify with, I want to be a fast adopter. I want to be there, but you have to do it sort of the, recognition. And you talk about sort of cognitive atrophy, right? And I mean, I feel it myself. And we would say, I would say it with Google, forget, before, I need my Google search to answer my questions. I can't remember things as well anymore. And now it's not just memory, it's creating, right? We use it so much to create, and if we become dependent on it. So talk a little bit about that and what you talk about it as cognitive atrophy in the book and what that means. As
that's a common. I mean, when I started to research this 5 years ago, Gen AI hadn't even surfaced, right? But in the course of me studying innovation, right, the umbrella of innovation, and how innovation is getting to be so much of a process now, everybody's talking about it. There's always different ways to idea manage, many ways to create companies, entrepreneurship. All that noise is now in the belly of the snake of healthcare, right? It's right there, and everyone thinks they know how to do it. Everyone's an expert on innovation now, and the word innovation has somewhat lost its meaning. So has disruption, the word disruption. So I decided to pen a piece of work that would have some timelessness to it, that spoke to my experience of the last 40 years in innovating in tech as well as in healthcare, and could also collect the innovative ideas that others had generated through the years, those much smarter than me, frankly. So I tried to put that all into a frame. But then came this Gen AI thing that in the course of me writing and researching, I could see very clearly, because my background is in AI in the past. I was in it in 82, believe it or not. Looking at it now, I had a real strange sense that I need to throw a frisbee when the dog hasn't even arrived. And so 3-4 years ago, I started writing this and researching this, where I could throw a frisbee in a direction would require me to commit. And what was the anchor of that? Now, if I told you that AI is great and here's all about AI, it'd be just like any other storyline. I needed to share with you both the pleasure of AI and the pain of AI. And I wanted to show a paradox, which is a relevant paradox that would happen at the dining table. The more I use tech, the less skilled I am. Because I don't have to do that spreadsheet, so I don't have to count. If I don't have to count, I don't have to think. Those things started to bug me. So I did some extensive research, meta-research, not primary, on that subject, and found the word atrophy, cognitive atrophy. And then I found research that showed that an over-obsessed usage of anything causes atrophy. Mental atrophy functions because you don't use the muscle of your brain. So let's think about it. I was at a hotel recently, and I left the hotel and I asked the bellman directions. And he said, I don't know, I don't have my phone with me. Well, last time I checked, the bellman gives you directions. Can't do it anymore because that part of his brain is shrunk. He's so reliant on the machine. That's just a micro example of how we obsess. Now, what does obsess mean? Before I go into atrophy, do you mind if I go into obsession a bit?
You're listening to Digital Health Talks. When we return, we'll continue our discussion on how technology is revolutionizing healthcare delivery. Stay with us to hear more insights on creating sustainable, patient-centered digital health solutions.
Obsession is defined by me in the clear terms of you go for the convenient. You just go for the convenient. Mm-hmm. Park your car really close so that you can walk in the mall. So if your mental model is to park your car really close, you'll spend an hour parking your car trying to find a spot near the mall, but you do it because that small walk you don't want to take. And that small walk is the walk that you have to take as a cognitive, insightful person. But we don't. We don't exercise ourselves. That's one. Number two is you go for the first opinion using the machine. So you ask the machine, what do you think of blah, blah, blah? Here's all the data. People brag about it nowadays. I put everything into the LLM. I gave it my book, I gave it my stories, and it told me who I really am and what I should think. It gave me the first opinion on my paper. It gave me a good start because it's hard for me to start. Well, those kinds of things are the beginnings of obsessive behavior, where you give up your first opinion. And finally, you go for good enough. Some of these drawings you see on the web done by machines are horrible, right? I mean, you can't notice the 6 fingers, right? But people are still doing it. They're doing videos that are embarrassing. They think it's art form. So now everyone can be an artist, a painter, a philosopher, a poet. All they have to do is pay and prompt. Mm-hmm. Well, that is the beginning of an obsessive society. Started with an obsessive individual not knowing that they are being obsessive. Now, if you think of any drug that people are addicted to, that's their behavior pattern too. Mm-hmm. It's the same 3 factors about addicting yourself to something. And most of the time they feel really good till they emaciate in their brain and mind and body, right? Right. So we are in the early phases of what I think is true. So atrophy is a function of those 3 elements being utilized obsessively. Mm-hmm. I'm being a nutrition label, not a warning label. So I'm asking you to take that sugar less than normal, try not to overdo it, and watch your diet. I'm not saying don't do it. I love AI. I'm an AI person myself. I just dream of it, work with it. So atrophy is really what happens to your brain when you don't fire as much across the multiple lobes of your brain, when you're writing a paper, when you're in college, when you're testing yourself. What happens to you? Does it shrink? Does it stay the same? All the facts that I have read imply, yes, you do shrink. And that shrinkage is pretty significant and it happens pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So I'm sending people a nutrition label on that right now.
Right. Which I love. And I think you make the point that, the atrophy, the fear and the obsession are both, that there's atrophy or slowness that happens. So we have to find the balance between the two, which of course in healthcare, we talk about a lot, balancing the risk and the reward, right, of technology in general. And we know from the very beginning of the discussion of technology to now what has evolved to AI, this discussion of, is it going to replace physicians? Is it going to replace clinicians? And I think we're all a bit past that, but we are in this sort of, almost a trough of disillusionment around what is it going to replace and how do we even begin to parse out what it does do well and safely.
Controversially speaking, people ask me, well, come on, scribing, automatic scribing is very useful. Populating the chart notes really quickly makes the doctor efficient. Are you telling us that, Mohan, you should be careful about that? And, I can have a choice, right? I have to make a choice. If I say, yes, be careful, nobody's going to hire me and ask my advice. If I say no, I'd be lying. Because to be honest with you, to myself, I think chart notes population, scribes are wonderful. If you're a 30-year physician, you now don't have to practice chart noting. But if you're a first-year resident, you better practice chart noting. Because if you don't know the art of the encumbrance of the inconvenient learning, because as you're charting, you're actually diagnosing. And that art form of pen to paper is lost. So what do new doctors become? What do new surgeons become when they don't understand the creative art form of surgery? They only understand the mechanics of surgery. So, I'm joking around and I'd say, Karate Kid would not have happened if it was for Gen AI, right? If he had Gen AI, he would just go to the web and figure the moves out and fight his own fight at home and get counseling from Claude or some other technology. He wouldn't have met Miyagi. And Miyagi asked him to paint the wall and scrub the floor. Miyagi knew the relationship between that inconvenient learning and the art of being the Karate Kid. And that's the beauty of it, right? You realize what you are doing really has major implications. We have not gone deep into the work of a physician, the work of a nurse, the work of an insurance person who's doing a spreadsheet, but now using machines to replicate that thinking. Yeah, you can be above average, but can you be unreachable? No. To be unreachable, you have to work through all of that to be inconveniently learning, finding your aha, and finding the first opinion. And if you don't do those three things, the chances are you're suboptimal in the long run.
Right. I mean, that message of the art of inconvenient learning is, I think, one that applies to everything, healthcare, education. I know you speak to a lot of, folks on the education side too, about what this means. And I think when I think about, we've been talking about it for, some time now, sort of the impact on the workforce and what it looks like. But it also starts with the impact on education, right? And how we're going to change how we educate clinicians in this context of practicing with AI.
Yeah, I had a patient who, I know a patient who had a cancer diagnosis. He found out the cancer diagnosis from the chart notes because it comes out, the results show carcinogens. So he found that out. Never got a call from his physician for a week. And then he finally met the physician, and the physician came in and said, by now you probably read that you have cancer. I mean, that's not the model, but it exists. I can tell you from experiences that's happening. People are forgetting that information is not the same as touching of hands, the placing of hands on the patient. So as long as we understand that compassion is very different than comprehension, and that is very different than computation, we know the difference between the three, we're going to be a great healthcare economy. If not, I think we will lose so much in the process. So guarding against this cognitive loss, the seeking of convenience over efficiency, and the ability to really have the time to engage is what we're losing now in healthcare. It is really going. And then we say personalization and individualism, and well, that personalization we think tech is going to replace. I challenge that. I think we have to understand what AI-enabled and insight-driven means. And I coined those phrases from combinations of other people's great ideas. But understanding AI enablement and then understanding what is insight over just general information flow is where I think the healthcare system ought to be going. Because people don't want to go see a doctor for information anymore. We can get that. We want the insight driven by the years of work that a physician has gone through with multiple patients that are like me or others to come up with an insightful solution to a pending urgent problem that they're all facing. Right. Information flow is, I think AI can handle that really well. There's no more need for that. Even contextually ready information for a person with a different context and another person with a different context. I think AI will get there. It'll replace things that are process oriented, that are understood by others. The knowledge you have will be replaced. The wisdom you bring to the instinctive way you do work will never, ever find a replacement. It'll just not happen. The question is, how much of your career is machine readable? If your career is machine readable, you're machine replaceable. So I can't help that. That's the way life is. But if you think that you have something that is machine unreadable, that you bring value to the process, that is uniquely yours, that solves the problem, not just gives an answer, then you really got it.
Right.
You're
I mean, you talk about the aha moment and sort of how that's kind of core to the framework and in terms of how both organizations and individuals should be thinking about this in terms of like with healthcare leaders kind of creating the circumstance for that, right? I mean, we're so focused, on using the technology to drive value or drive a return on the investment, right? And it really does a lot of the time in healthcare come down to money. And to some degree, it's also been where AI has focused. The technology companies want to focus there, right? It's the lower risk. It's less patient facing and drives more resources, and resources ultimately, let's hope to some degree, get freed up to give better patient care. But when it comes to, what are we really going to use this for to change healthcare, to make it better? How are you guiding some of your, C-suite colleagues on the healthcare side to think about this?
They are all struggling with it, and I'm glad they are. because I want them to inconveniently learn this too. I don't think it's going to be easy. Anyone who calls themselves an expert in this field is only one page ahead of you. So my third book, actually this is my fourth book, FYI. My third book was on strategic decision making, and it was fundamentally about what to deal with when the world is unknown more than known. And I wrote that in 2010, believe it or not. It's still applicable now because the more of the unknown unknowns have happened. In other words, AI is an unknown unknown. We do not know the impact, the size of the impact of AI. We just know it's big. We do not know the incidence of it. We don't know when it's going to happen. And right now it's happening at a daily basis where change is occurring. So if you rely your backplane of your thinking on AI, you're going to be fluttering around everywhere. You'll be chasing your own tail. So what is the thing you anchor on that truly as an institution you necessarily have to engage on? And in a weird way, and in an almost obvious way, it's your values as a business and how you take those values into actual day-to-day operating table activities, how your people actually perform. Now, in my prior life, I spent 7 years running a software company that had 76% market share in the area of cost and performance management. So I was dealing with a field called activity-based costing. And in that field, the main study was operating measures usually do not tell you what people are doing. They only tell you the outcomes of it. They're mostly lagging indicators. So where are the leading indicators? If you walk down the hallway and people are doing work that is useless, you're probably spending money, right? It's kind of obvious. If people are doing work and are really justifying their work and the work is not necessarily value added, you're probably spending money. So if you can fire people, you can lay off people, but the work get absorbed by other people. So if you don't focus on the work itself, the value added and non-value added work, you will always be shrinking, growing, because the work as a whole is being absorbed and disabsorbed depending on whoever turns up. So focus on the activities. If you want to apply AI to anything, apply to the necessary activities, removing the unnecessary activities. Caution label on this one instead of nutrition label. The caution label is don't go remove non-financially justifiable activities. Be very careful about that. It's non-financially justifiable that the doctor called the patient when he had cancer. But it was absolutely justifiable in the values you want to deliver and your Medicare score because that patient's going to give you a bad Medicare score. And then it's going to be 70 million for every star point that you lose. And you'll ask yourself, why? We did everything right. Well, one thing you didn't do right, which was that phone call. So I ask CEOs constantly to really align their activities to the values. So it's not a value proposition argument, which look, we've beat that to the ground. What's your value proposition? How do you measure it? It's really your values proposition that you then use AI to enable.
Join us next week for part 2 of this interview. Thank you for joining us on Digital Health Talks with hosts Megan Antonelli, Janae Sharp, and Shahid Shah. For more insights on healthcare innovation and a deeper dive into today's discussion, visit healthimpactlive.com. Join us next week as we continue exploring the technologies and strategies transforming healthcare.